Welcome back, everyone. My name is Fire. Market can't seem to make up its mind, can it? At first, it looks like we had a couple of breakouts. Then, over the weekend, a little bit of a breakdown, bit of a bounce. Now we're failing that bounce. So what's going on? Well, unfortunately, that just tends to be the nature of the market. More often than not, unless you can identify a very strong trending market, and crypto just isn't trending, unfortunately. You're going to see a lot of sideways action. This does tend to bore out a lot of people before the big move. We'll take a look at some of the indicators here. This indicator here, momentum, is just showing that we're just not getting any traction. We had the big capitulation there back towards the start of October, and that's really what we're dancing around. But let's take a look at some of these charts and see if we can get some more insight and see what's going to happen next. Bitcoin. All right, let's take a look here. So unfortunately, we were a little bit more bearish than I was expecting. If we take a look here at the daily chart, we were eyeballing this little daily imbalance over here from about the 23rd of October. Unfortunately, we sliced through that on a closing basis and even took out this bottom turtle soup down here. Got a little template. I'm not the biggest on the usage of these templates down here, but I like to mark for sell side this little dollar arrows minus. That way you just know it's a little bit of a target there. We got one for buy side too. But what are we doing? I think we're just stuck. I know if you zoom in here, it might look very scary. And one of the things I also track is sentiment. So as we were expanding down here on this little, I think you could call this a bull trap. I think ICT likes to call this a Judas swing. But you took this buy side right here, this buy side right here. In fact, let's go ahead and mark that so we can see it a little bit more clearly. This was also the pre-FOMC sweep, so you did get a little bit of rejection down there and just started going all the way back down here to the sell side. So if you can identify this sideways type of action, you're actually going to do very well. You'll just trade the little range here. Quick Fingers Luke calls this A-B trading. But I think the big question we're all asking is, when are we going to get out of this? Well, we do have some November seasonality. If we look here at October, it was a gigantic swing. So far, the end of October has been a little bit of a swing. And one thing we can do to help gauge when this is going to happen, it's not a perfect science. Typically, you're going to need some kind of big event. But one of the tools that we like to put on our charts here is called the Bollinger Band. And what you can really try to do is look for these areas where it gets really tight. So for example, right here, that tends to precede a very big and explosive move over here. So as you can see, we're getting tight here. I don't know what the market is waiting for. Like I was saying, I was expecting FOMC to really break us out of this range. So whether we're just going to be consolidating, try to keep boring everyone out of the market, I think that's what we're doing, unfortunately. And we just need to keep playing the range. But what do we see? Let's take a look at the 4-hour. The bulls have defended so far. You really like to see that displacement buy up. So I think there are still buyers in this market over here. My eye is drawn immediately to this imbalance up here. I think that's probably the short-term target for a buy-side objective. Now that being said, if we come back here to the daily, I still think we're just going to be drawn to this buy-side up here. I know we had a very aggressive sell-off. It was also, I believe, on a Friday. I guess it was a Thursday, so you do have market backing with the volume. But since the weekend, we've just been going sideways here and hanging out. So let's zoom back out to the daily over here. That little imbalance, we can probably draw this a little bit better. Let's go ahead and sneak that down just a hair, just so that we can draw it on the fair value gap. Again, nothing too scientific about preferring these fair value gaps. In fact, it almost always wicks through. But where are we? So consolidating is the name of the game. I was hoping we would see a little bit something more, either continuation to the downside or breaking up to the upside, but we're just not getting it. We do have the buyers standing in here. Perfect little bullish turtle soup if you're able to get in on that entry. Now, some of these are very quick. I don't think this one was as quick as the FOMC announcement, but what you're really trying to look for, it's not even that complicated, honestly. So we always wait for the sweep. Believe it or not, 9 times out of 10, you can actually backtest yourself. It almost always does a sweep on a good reversal, but this is a nice daily reversal down there. You're looking for a bit of displacement, and all I really mean by that is a strong buy candle. So you actually do have it right here. I would call that pretty good displacement, but that doesn't have the sweep. So it's those two together that you're really going to want to be looking for. It's not super strong, but you can see a little bit of a displacement right there. You actually weren't even weak enough to come back and test it. But in this kind of thing, you're either going to want to just be patient, wait for the retrace. It's probably going to happen, honestly. We'll see if I can curse the market with that. Or if you think it's getting too out of out of hand, one thing you can also try to do is just limit order directly into the level. So if you have a buy order sitting here and you don't think the market is going to attack the very lows, which for whatever reason you may have, and in fact, if we come over here, you've also got your Fibonacci tool. I wish I would have seen this real time because I think that would have been pretty impressive to time. But if you draw the swing low to the swing high up here, again, really, there's really not a science to why I'm picking those. They're just the bigger part of the wave that I see. But you have the nice golden touch Fibonacci extension right here. Perfect little tap on the market down there. So if you ever want to do a little parlor trick, you can actually bottom tick here. And you'd be surprised how often this hits, these OTEs. It's not really easy to know when it's going to respect or not. Typically you want to go with trend, and as per my first video, I think we're still in the uptrend even though the bears are really starting to push and if nothing else stop our momentum. But you can see we have a lot of good things going for us. That bearish sell side sweep on the daily level. You would have had to have pretty much bought into the level, but then you've also got this Fibonacci support right there, which is really a really good way to at least gauge where you think price is going to go. I don't know the reason or the science behind why this is respected so much, but my suspicion is that it just has to do with probabilities, and you just tend to cluster around these psychological retracement levels. But anyway, so what else do we have? We had that tiny bit of a inverted head and shoulders. So I think you were supported off of that. You got a nice little bid out of the danger zone. Let's go ahead and undo those on the small time frame. They're not going to be quite as important to us. And then where are we right now? Fortunately, it's just choppy and sideways. We had a little bit of an attack here on the buy side with CME market opening just a couple of hours ago. But since then, we've just had a little bit of a sell-off. So really just not making anything happen here. And we're just going to have to wait it out. So what's the name of the game? Well, I think until we lose this swing down over here, we have to remain bullish. And I know it's going to be scary. If you're wanting to day trade, you're actually getting a lot more alpha by trading this range over here. But if you're trying to swing, I still think we look for the upside. You have the very clear equal highs up here. I think those are going to get tagged sooner or later. Let's see if it tagged this down here. It might not have, so that was preserved. But you did tag some pretty decent sell side right here already, and you displaced up. You can actually see this on the 4 hour. You see a little bit of a imbalanced rate here. You're able to buy into that wick right there, buy into that wick. I don't know if these wicks were real, but if you are just waiting with your limit orders right here, you could have caught those. Maybe we'll test again over here. We'll see. But I think you're going to be looking for upside. I think the top of the market is still going to be a pretty reasonable objective. And of course, if that also does work, you're going to be looking for altcoins to do well. Ethereum. Okay, so altcoins are a little bit of a mixed bag. I think some altcoins obviously are doing better and a lot are doing worse. We'll take a look at ADA and Doge. Some of those names stand out. What's kind of interesting is that as part of my $500 to $5 million challenge, we had Litecoin as a bit of a standout in terms of recoverability. But let's just get started here, get our feet wet with Ethereum. So what do we see? Just a bunch of consolidation. We can see that we're just squeezing into this range over here. We had a little bit of a bigger breakdown on the Thursday sell-off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the smaller time frames. So you can see that was pretty aggressive to the downside. We took the sell side over here from the Wednesday. Did we take it down here? Let's see. Didn't quite get that low level, so I would say that that's probably going to be a good target to keep an eye on. So if we do sweep, we're starting to get pretty dangerous. I think that if you want to be bullish, we're going to be wanting to start expanding very quickly by tomorrow or perhaps Tuesday at the latest away from this range. You want to start attacking these high-level targets up here. Otherwise, I think there's a whole bunch of sell side clustered at the bottom down here. Altcoins probably won't hold if we start closing under these levels down here. But like in Bitcoin, what we do have on the positive side is that displacement. So you did sweep this Wednesday over here. And if you look here at the smaller time frames, you did get that nice displacement. It's a little bit clearer on Ethereum here. I think altcoins were a little bit more sold off relatively, but you got that nice displacement right there. You got it up here as well. If we take a look at maybe at the hourly, we can probably see it pretty nicely there as well. So I think it's going to be hard to get long if you weren't just watching the sweep down there. You really don't want it to come all the way back down here just because this pattern. So one of the patterns that one of my friends invented, he calls it the alien invasion. Let me see if I can actually find it on a picture. In 3, 2, 1, and we're back. All right, so this is a bullish pattern. You can also see a bearish variation if you take the opposite, like you do in all markets. But what you're really looking for is this bit of a pretty exaggerated sell-off here and a very quick buyback. That's what we call an alien invasion. And it gets that name from this picture down over here. This, I think, is from the movie War of the Worlds. But looking at the legs down here, you've got a pretty long left leg right here. A very dramatic and exaggerated right leg. But really what makes this an invasion is that you're attacking the humans, right? But then once you're done with your attack, then you go ahead and take off with all of their money, right? So it's kind of this pattern where you have a pretty steep rally against you, but then once it's done, it'll go ahead and quickly reverse. But that's where I think we are. So ideally, we are going to keep going up quickly because we want the damage to be done here, kind of like a attack there already done. If we start revisiting, in fact, I'm thinking if we even lose some of these levels right here, we're starting to get nervous again. I know the market is consolidating, so maybe it's just trying to rattle us. Maybe it's just not really ready to move and we're just going to go a couple more days sideways. We'll see. But I think if that alien invasion pattern is valid, we're going to be wanting to see some more upside sooner than later. So what are you doing for Ethereum? We're just waiting, unfortunately. I think that you're a little bit lower in this range, so it makes more sense to look for buys. You did sweep some liquidity right there. You are displacing up, so I think those are cases in our favor. Of course, if you're able to get in on that buy right there, perfect little entry. Swing the low. Aster. Okay, Aster is being a little bit tricky, isn't it? Originally, we were hoping that our breakout of the wedge was going to hold and you can manage your position based on the swing lows. Unfortunately, what they decided to do was be a little bit nasty and turn this into a fake breakout, which is always possible. You always got to watch out for when that happens. You could have done the SMT with Bitcoin where you're going to say, hey, let's just go ahead and take off our risk. Bitcoin is into some pretty good resistance over here. We think the altcoins might cool off, maybe also with the NASDAQ. And that's exactly what happened over here with Aster. So you had a little bit of a failed breakdown, and you did have some clues, right? So what we always like to do is look for displacement in either direction. And you can see it pretty clearly here on this hourly right there. Maybe you'd be looking for a little bit of a bigger wick, but what you also see is that bearish delivery right there. And then if that wasn't enough, you try to recover over here. You got more displacement down here. Boom, boom. So maybe this was your warning shot on the candles over here. Once you start losing that range, you're starting to really break down. And you got pretty excited to the downside over here, ultimately testing that old daily level. So what did we do? Well, if we look over here on the 4-hour time frame, let's go ahead and draw the imbalance over here. We did a couple of things. One, we took a bit of a turtle soup over here from the Wednesday 22 bottom, swept. And what's very important is that you got some closes down here, and then you close back in the range. That tends to by itself be a buy pattern, but you also got a little bit of a retest down here if you were watching and if you were looking at the candles. So that right there is your entry, believe it or not. You had to be on top of your game. I was actually not watching. I think this was maybe very early. I'm typically not awake around this time. So if you caught that, then well done. The other entry would be right here on the breakout as it closes. Of course, as you close, that's going to be way out of the money, so you don't really want to buy after the pump has happened. The other way to buy is as it crosses. Of course, you would need something like a limit order or some kind of, stop trigger to get into the market at that point. This particular candle I'm hearing was because of some tweet by the Binance owner CZ. So you can see this is obviously not a regular candle, very news-based. How much did you go up by? About 30%, so that's a pretty good pump in crypto. Very common to see in coins like this, which are smaller market caps and a little bit more illiquid. But the idea was there, so we had our eyes set for the buy side. Unfortunately, decided to do our alien invasion, take out a lot of those stops, and then after a bit of consolidation, you did have a chance to buy back on. I think the clue that you're starting to displace up from that level, as well as the retest into the imbalance down here, was a perfect entry. If you did get stopped out, you don't really want to fight the market. This is an oversold market, so I think you can DCA, but your entry very clearly is right there. So well done anyone that can grab that 90 down there. Litecoin. Okay, so Litecoin is what I'd say is a bit more typical of what we've seen with the altcoins. This is a very messy chart, so I'm actually going to clean it up. But just before we do, we were expecting a little bit more high side, and I think that's still going to be the marching order. But of course, we got that little bit of a Thursday sell-off down here. That did accompany a sell-off on the NASDAQ. I think that's what ultimately just pulled down the crypto coins, the loss of confidence in those markets. But let's go ahead and take a look here at Litecoin. Okay, so as with Bitcoin, we're very spotty. The market doesn't want to pick a trend. What am I drawn to? I'm drawn to a little bit of this backtest and expansion up. I'm just not loving how timid the market is. I was really hoping for a bit more of a pronounced blast off, and you're consolidating, which is fine. Maybe you just need a little more time. It is Sunday, so we don't really have a lot of liquidity here. So Monday is really going to be when the market opens back up again, and we get some of these moves backed by some bigger players. But we're just consolidating. I think we did hold. You got that alien invasion pattern right there, which is typically a bullish signal that you've taken out enough sellers of the market and you're able to very quickly displace. So I think that's a positive sign. Let's go ahead and clear off these markers again. We can see that nice displacement down here. This is an inversion. So you have a bearish fair value gap, which is a big sell candle with no wicks on either side. But as you close right here, I think you've now inverted that. So that's good. As long as you continue to hold this range right here, maybe you can try to backtest and position long. I still think you look to the upside. What do we have? As I kept on saying the last time, is this big range over here to fill out right here. So I think when the market is ready, that's probably what the market is trying to bore everyone else out, is to get them to give up. And I think they did. I think they got a lot of people to give up on this candle. But assuming that that is ready to fill, I think once the market is ready to start moving, it's going to fill this gap at basically the drop of a hat. You saw how fast Aster was, and of course, it's not going to take anything but a tweet from our president, right? So that'll send all these coins, I think, to fill this gap right here. And whether or not we can hold a bigger bullish turtle soup right here, you do typically get a small retrace. I'm not going to recommend trying to sell or really fight a retrace over here, even though we're probably going to see it, and it's probably going to be very deep. Because assuming that the market is bullish, and I think it is, or at least it's ready to start getting bullish, I think it's going to be pretty volatile, and you're going to miss moves to the upside if you do try to get a little cute with it. But that's the marching order. So Litecoin was a little bit stronger in that it recovered a lot of the sell-off right here. We're actually retesting it right now, which I think is a good sign. You're a little weak on the smaller time frames. If you zoom in, it looks a little bit messy. Bear blocks. But I think as far as the market is concerned, we held a very important swing right there. We didn't even have to take out these sellers right here, which is typically a sign of strength. And that's why I think Litecoin is hopefully going to help lead us on some of these repairs. ADA. ADA is a really good example of a coin that is a lot weaker. And I think also like Doge, it's just not really finding any buyers. So we took out the buy side over here. In fact, let's go ahead and clear off some of the chart just a little bit and redraw. So ADA is pretty weak. I think this coin is not really finding a lot of love. What you also have is a bearish cup right here. I will say, kind of like the Head and Shoulders, the inverted Head and Shoulders, they tend to get faked out a lot, so maybe this is your last bear trap. I'm not going to say that ADA is great for the upside. I think what you really want to look for is, if you're in a strong market and a strong coin, stick with that one. That's why I'm picking Litecoin and Solana from the day before. But this is looking pretty bearish. You have that alien invasion right here, but it's just not really doing anything with it. And I think we're just going to need to wait for either a sweep of these lows, which you already did, in fact, so that's really not a great sign at all. You did close back above, so maybe you're trying to fish for a very exaggerated inverted Head and Shoulders, but I don't love it. I do think it's great risk to reward if you like this project. I don't think this is going to be a bad spot to DCA. But as far as actual trying to get some movement to the upside, you might do a little better in stronger coins. But of course, if we start losing some of the lows are going to be wanting to be careful as well. But I think you've taken a lot of sell side. So if the market is going to hold, you'd like to see it move up, and you'd like to see it move up pretty soon within the next couple of days. You can also draw this trend line down here, so we're squeezing. This is another nice way to estimate how long some of these moves might take. Currently, it's the 2nd on a Sunday night, so maybe here by about Tuesday, we're just out of the clock for this particular pattern. And hopefully by then, we're going to be expanding up nicely with a very decisive upthrust. Or if there's some bad news and the market keeps going down, we're going to break down. Dogecoin. All right, the last one we'll take a look at here is our friend Doge down here. Like ADA and like Solana, it's a little bit weaker. We did have a nice bearish expansion. This one was tricky. I was a little undecided on how this would resolve on the day after FOMC, but you can see our bearish point at our 19,273. Ultimately, we just flagged out a little bit, and then the market fell off, right? So this one was hard. You had a lot of fake outs, you had a lot of wicks. Ultimately, we expanded down to the alien invasion, and you have bounced a little bit, and now you're just going sideways. So whether this is another flag, it's hard to say. What you're going to be wanting to look for is, what is Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin, I think, is going to set the stage. So what do we do from here? Well, it's pretty choppy, very volatile. Market cannot make up its mind. If you do want to wait and you want to just wait for the big range to break, you can wait for another test of the lows to see if we sweep and close below, or if we sweep and hold. If you want to be a little bit more optimistic, you can try to DCA and perhaps put your stops under the swing lows. I think we're being optimistic. Of course, on the very small time frames, this can change hour to hour, minute to minute. Bears have the ball. They are pushing the market down, but we are into some of those key supports, right? Some of the swing lows, some of the Fibonacci replacements. We saw some of the alien invasions, so it's just going to be a battle. If you want to try to grind out some day trades, AB is probably the best place to be. But I do think you are going to be wanting to build out a bigger swing bag for some of those bigger long buy targets. Okay, I think that's all there is to it. So you guys stay safe out there. I know the market is really grindy. It's really trying to wear us out before the big move. But you guys stay safe out there and safe trading.